What if the reason you are overlooked is not lack of talent, but a hidden habit that trains people to ignore you? Today we dismantle the approval trap, expose the psychology that keeps you predictable, and replace it with a system for commanding respect without theatrics. If you have ever swallowed words to keep the piece paid in time for scraps of attention, or felt invisible in rooms, you should lead Stay With Me. Respect and approval are not the same currency. Approval is a mood others grant when you meet their preferences. Respect is a stable assessment of your boundaries, your leverage, and your consequences. Chasing the first dilutes the second. The more your choices are optimized to be liked, the more you telegraph need, and need is the most expensive signal in any social market because it invites exploitation. Here's the core mechanism. When you make being liked the priority, your behavior becomes algorithmic. People can predict you will agree, minimize your needs, and tolerate lateness or sliding. Predictability creates cheap access, and cheap access erodes status. The result is a paradox. You work harder to please and become easier to dismiss. That is not a character flaw. It is operant conditioning you have accidentally taught others. Respect rests on consequence. I am not speaking about intimidation. I am speaking about cost. Systems gain stability when violations are priced. Human groups are no different. The leaders you quietly admire, the mentor who never explains the obvious, the peer who says no without drama, each communicates a schedule of consequences. Cross the line, and access narrows. Deliver value, and access expands. The rule is consistent, swift, and quiet. A practical reframing follows. Admiration rewards performance. Respect rewards enforcement. Performance without enforcement breeds dependency. Enforcement without performance breeds resentment. Durable authority balances both. You demonstrate value and you defend the terms under which that value is available. In negotiation theory, this is your reservation point and your alternatives. In attachment theory, it resembles secure autonomy, proximity with boundaries. Why do agreeable people get mistreated? Because they have signaled they will absorb the cost. Social systems route friction toward the lowest resistor. If your calendar, attention, and forgiveness are limitless, other people will spend them. Not because they are evil, but because all systems follow least resistance. Your job is to raise resistance at the right points with proportionate consequences. From this moment, replace a single reflex. Instead of explaining, enforce. Explanation is often a covert bid for approval. Enforcement is a transfer of cost. Shorten access pause favors. End the meeting on time, decline the invitation without apology. Say less, move first, and let the new price teach for you. If you are ready to stop negotiating against yourself, begin here. Over the next minutes, I will give you a step-by-step protocol to reset your boundaries. Make your presence scarce, but valuable, and convert admiration into durable respect. Because the implementation begins today. Respect is not built on charm or constant availability. It is built on the psychology of control. In every human interaction, explicit or subtle, the question is the same: who sets the terms? Approval seekers surrender this control without realizing it. They adjust speech to avoid conflict, agree to tasks they dislike, and apologize reflexively. Each adjustment seems small, but across weeks and years, the accumulation is a transfer of authority. You may feel generous in the moment, but the pattern conditions others to expect compliance. Behavioral psychology explains this through reinforcement. When someone violates your boundary and you do not respond, you reinforce the behavior. The absence of consequence acts as a reward. Over time, the violator escalates not because they are malicious, but because the environment teaches them that testing you has no cost. In organizational studies, this is called tolerance drift. Teams or families drift into dysfunction, not through one dramatic event, but through repeated tolerance of small violations, until dysfunction feels normal. Consider the leader who commands attention. They are not always the most eloquent or the most senior. They are the ones who speak less, but whose silence signals judgment. People wait because they know that when this person speaks, it will not be for approval, but for clarity. Their restraint increases the weight of their words. Machiavelli observed that men judge by appearance more than by reality. Yet reality asserts itself when boundaries are enforced. In practice, this means you become more respected, not by adding more words, but by removing unnecessary ones. A critical distinction must be made between admiration and respect. Admiration is granted for talent, skill, or beauty. Respect is granted when others perceive consequence in dealing with you. Admiration without respect is fragile. A musician may be admired for skill but disrespected in business negotiations if they lack boundaries. A manager may be admired for competence, yet find their schedule constantly invaded if they lack enforcement. This is why so many talented individuals feel invisible. They confuse admiration for respect, and the two currencies cannot be exchanged. To regain authority, you must practice consequence consistently. This does not require aggression. It requires clarity and speed. A friend cancels repeatedly. You reduce access. A colleague interrupts you. You stop speaking and withhold further collaboration. A client delays payment. You suspend delivery. Each action sends a clear signal. My time and energy are finite and violations cost. The consequence does not need to be dramatic. It needs to be reliable. Strategic distance multiplies this effect. Social psychology demonstrates scarcity, increases perceived value. When your presence, attention, and forgiveness are selective, they become prized. Availability is not kindness when it erodes your leverage. It is leakage. Choose where to appear, whom to support, and when to speak. Distance is not rejection. It is valuation. The shift begins internally. Approval addiction is real, a dopamine cycle where compliments act as rewards. To break it, you must learn to tolerate discomfort. The silence after you refuse, the tension after you enforce. That discomfort is not danger, it is the sound of boundaries being installed. The addiction to approval is not just a weakness of character, it is a neurological loop. Each time you receive praise or social validation, your brain releases dopamine. That surge feels good, but like any drug, the effect fades quickly. What follows is craving. You look for the next compliment, the next sign of acceptance, the next like on a post. This cycle is exploited easily. People recognize that a small amount of praise can influence your behavior disproportionately. Employers use it to extract more work. Friends use it to secure favors. Partners may use it to avoid accountability. In all cases, the approval addict becomes predictable and therefore controllable. This dynamic explains why people who seem endlessly kind often find themselves drained. Their generosity is genuine, but it is weaponized against them. When approval is the currency, those who hold it control the market. This is why breaking the cycle is so crucial. You cannot negotiate respect from a position of need. You must rewire the system so that validation comes from within rather than from external reinforcement. Cognitive behavioral methods offer one path. When you feel the impulse to explain, justify, or seek reassurance, pause. Ask, what is my actual objective here? Am I protecting my values? Or am I bargaining for approval? If it is the latter, withhold the behavior. Over time, resisting the compulsion weakens the loop. Another strategy is to replace the metric of success. Instead of evaluating interactions by whether others liked you, evaluate them by whether you maintained your standards. This reframing shifts power from external judgment to internal consistency. Unpredictability also plays a role. When people know you will always agree, they stop considering your perspective. When they are uncertain about your reaction, they become cautious. This is not manipulation, but balance. Predictable compliance is an invitation for exploitation. Strategic unpredictability keeps others attentive. Sometimes you say yes, sometimes no, sometimes you remain silent. The point is that your behavior is guided by your values, not by their expectations. Another cornerstone is emotional neutrality under attack. When someone provokes you, their goal is often not truth but control. If you react emotionally, you confirm their power. If you respond with calm, even indifference, you demonstrate autonomy. This is why Stoicism has been respected across centuries. A calm response under pressure signals resilience and mastery. It tells others that their tactics do not determine your state of mind. That message commands respect more effectively than any speech. Finally, boundaries must be enforced silently and swiftly. Warnings, repeated explanations, or delayed responses dilute impact. When the line is crossed, act immediately and proportionately. If you say no, mean it. If you withdraw, do not explain endlessly. The simplicity of action communicates more than words. Over time, people learn that your boundaries are not symbolic, but operational. At this stage, you are not chasing approval. You are redefining interaction. Others may resist, some may leave, but those who remain will engage on terms of respect. Commanding respect requires understanding the psychology of power exchange. In every relationship, professional, social, or intimate power is negotiated sometimes explicitly, more often implicitly. When you over-explain decisions repeatedly, seek reassurance, or chase reconciliation, you shift power away from yourself. Conversely, when you enforce boundaries without lengthy justification, you preserve equilibrium. Machiavelli's insight remains relevant. Appearance matters, but consequence matters more. People may admire what you seem to be, yet their true behavior is shaped by what it costs them to mistreat you. The rules for commanding respect are pragmatic. First, speak less and act more. Those who fill silence with endless explanations dilute their authority. Consider a courtroom. The judge commands attention, not by speaking constantly, but by speaking with finality. In your daily life, brevity and decisiveness signal control. Second, never chase approval. This is simple to say, yet difficult to practice, because the craving for acceptance is deeply ingrained. Resist the urge to resend messages, to over-apologize, or to convince someone of your worth. Indifference to their approval is magnetic. When others realize that their opinion does not dictate your choices, they unconsciously elevate their perception of you. Third, remain calm under attack. When someone provokes you, their true test is not in the insult itself, but in observing your reaction. Anger or defensiveness reveals that they can control your emotions. Calmness communicates psychological independence. In leadership literature, this is called emotional regulation, the ability to remain stable under pressure. It not only disarms adversaries, but also reassures allies. Fourth, cultivate unpredictability. Predictable generosity, predictable forgiveness, and predictable compliance are liabilities. Sometimes you must say no when people expect yes, or enforce a rule when they assume you will bend. Strategic unpredictability compels people to respect your autonomy because they cannot script your response. Fifth, enforce boundaries with speed and silence. A delayed response or an elaborate justification reduces impact. If a colleague disrespects your time, end the meeting immediately. If a friend repeatedly ignores commitments, reduce contact without debate. Consequences delivered swiftly recalibrate behavior more effectively than words. This practice echoes behavioral conditioning. Immediacy strengthens. Learning delay weakens it. Scarcity and distance are additional multipliers. Constant availability makes your presence ordinary. Scarcity signals value. When you attend selectively, respond deliberately, and reserve your energy for contexts that align with your priorities, others take notice. This is not cruelty, it is strategic management of limited resources. Your time and attention are finite, and by treating them as scarce, you elevate their worth. Social psychology consistently demonstrates that rarity increases desirability. In this light, boundaries are not walls, but pricing mechanisms. When these principles converge, your identity shifts. You cease to be the person negotiating for approval and become the person setting terms. Some relationships will not survive this transition. That is not failure, but filtration. Those who exploited compliance will leave. Those who respect autonomy will remain and deepen their commitment. This filtration process is essential to building a network grounded in respect rather than dependency. The final transformation is psychological freedom. When you detach self-worth from external approval, you reclaim authorship of your life. The endless cycle of performing for acceptance, adjusting opinions to match the room, and concealing parts of yourself collapses. In its place emerges a core identity that is consistent, resilient, and self-directed. You no longer ask what will make them like me, but what aligns with my values and objectives. That reframe alters every decision, from negotiations in business to conversations in family. The cost is discomfort. Others will test your new stance. Some will accuse you of being harsh or distant. These are attempts to pull you back into predictability where they controlled the script. Tolerate the discomfort. Each time you uphold a boundary despite criticism, you reinforce a new narrative: respect is non-negotiable. Over time, this narrative becomes your reputation. People learn that your presence carries weight, your decisions stand firm, and your approval is never traded cheaply. Respect is not about cruelty, nor is it about fear in the sense of intimidation. It is about consequence, scarcity, and authenticity. It is about signaling that your resources, time, attention, trust, have value and must be treated accordingly. The paradox is that by ceasing to chase approval, you often receive more genuine admiration. Authenticity attracts, while compliance erodes. Machiavelli's wisdom resonates here. Power belongs not to those who are liked, but to those who control the terms of engagement. Your task is not to abandon kindness, but to anchor it in strength. Start today with the next interaction. Say less, enforce more, and treat your presence as valuable. Respect is not a gift others bestow. It is a stance you embody.